Good people out there. So glad to be with you. I'm AJ McMahon, and here we are again, continuing this journey of empowering children 12 and under to overcome significant challenges. I'm excited about this opportunity. We're here because children out there are struggling, families are struggling, parents are struggling, professionals are struggling. When it comes to children 12 and the emotional, behavioral challenges that seem like disorders in their brains. It is very confusing and frustrating. And there's a great concern that we have in our homes, in our lives, in our society about our children and the desire for them to succeed and achieve and do well and behave and listen and control themselves and make good choices and become and really be on a full-time basis the wonderful children that we know that they are. We are on that journey together to empower that through natural and powerful and effective means. And that's why we're here. Thank you for being here with me. I'm AJ. What's your name? I may not know it right now, but in connect. I thank you for that. Thank you because we get to do this together and we need each other to empower whatever child has been placed in your care, or you get the opportunity to see and witness and pour into. So that's what we're going to do today. Let me pour into you a little bit. First, I want to ask you, you checked out, had the opportunity to check out any of the other videos in this 5-part series as we continue the final part of this series, but not part of our journey because this is an opportunity for us. But this is part 5, discernment. We started with part 1, disillusion, and we journeyed through drugs and history and development and disorder and so many things that I hope you would check out the previous videos so that we can have the opportunity to put all of this information together, empower you wherever you are, and you can pass on that empowerment to your child. You might feel discouraged, you might feel hopeful, whatever your feelings are. I want you to know that I believe in you and your child. How can I say that? Because you're able to overcome the struggles. You're able to help your child, that child, those children overcome the struggles. I know this because this is what we were designed for. These are the resources we have. And we get to discern that today, that 98 to 99% of children are not disordered. That ADHD is something that is real, but it is not what we're told it is or led to believe. Have you ever had something in your life that you maybe believed for a long time, and maybe you didn't believe for a long time, and then something occurred? You were encountered with some accurate information, and it changed your perspective. I was going to use in my work the example from history that I'd been with that had been shared with me for a long time, that people in the past used to believe the earth was flat. I thought this could be a great metaphor for a variety of reasons, and me coming to the understanding that it's important to really dive into information and just make sure that it's accurate. I looked it up. I was surprised once again to find that there is no foundation historically that supports that people in history largely believed the earth was flat. That metaphor thrown out the window. Also, for about 50 years of my life, I I was going to say I would eat steak, but I'm sure not for 50 years. I ate steak because there was probably a time in my life when I couldn't chew steak. But excuse me, throughout my life, I was led to believe that when I opened a package of raw steak, that the red uh, liquidy stuff, blood. And I believed that until I had an encounter and I got the accurate information that it's actually a combination of water and an enzyme. You can look this up. That when we open that package of steak and that red liquidy stuff that looks like blood, that comes from raw meat, that seems like it should be blood, and probably many of you already know this, and you're just shaking your head like, AJ, I can't believe you didn't know this, but I didn't know it. I didn't know that it wasn't blood. And now I have an accurate understanding, which has changed my perspective that that's not blood, even though it looks like it. There's so many that can look one way, but they're different. What has been an opportunity for discernment in your life? Here we have another. We get a chance to discern, and part of this discernment is starting with what ADHD is, that we've talked about through this series, that your struggles or the struggles of your children or your child 12 and under are very real. There is no mistake about that. However, when we look at the accurate information, when we go to the one source of diagnosis, yes, my DSM cover is a little frayed here, but that's okay. We're not perfect people. Things don't have to be perfect, but we get a chance to be on an excellent journey of accurate information. And when we look inside the DSM, in the introduction to the DSM, we find a statement by the leaders of the World Health Organization, the American Psychiatric Association, that put together the DSM. And what they share in the introduction that you can look up for yourself is that they connected the concept of ADHD with the brain because they had to make a judgment about it based on incomplete or more often conflicting data, not neuroscience. That that ADHD is connected to neurology is because there was conflicting data that caused the leaders of the WHO and the American and the APA, let's just use some acronyms here, to make a judgment about it. So if those leaders aren't certain that the phenomenon of ADHD has anything to do with the brain, how can we base lives and legacies on it being a neurological phenomenon or condition or disorder, neurodivergence, any of that stuff? We get a chance to discern the accurate information that the symptoms of ADHD are very real. The struggle is very real, yet the accurate information is that there are a variety of factors that contribute to that struggle. What might be some of the normal, natural factors that might be at play that may cause us to have this struggle? And you may be on a journey of understanding that, and there can be confusion, and many of you may believe you've gotten the answers and you don't want to go back to a state of confusion. But beyond confusion, beyond the struggle, through the discernment, we get an opportunity for true information that can be the foundation of a fulfillment and an overcoming that you can present to a child that you can't even imagine. And that's why we're here. I've seen this in my own home, in my own life, in my practice with countless families. That is the journey that we're on. For you to use your discernment, for us to understand with this discernment that there is no medication for ADHD. There are psychotropic drugs. Again, like we talked about in the previous video, we are not here to make judgments about that because that's not what it's about. It's about us having accurate information of what is so that we can make informed decisions. Part of the accurate information when it comes to things is not to bring any type of shame, not for us to have any regret of our choices, not for us to feel bad about something, not for us to get consumed with blame. It's for us to be able to look at things for what they are, to take a step back, to examine, to get the information, even though challenging, even though we might want to just turn this off or throw it away or tuck our head, for us to be able to hold our heads up high and say, we have the courage to be able to explore what is accurate, to discern what is truth. And that's the path that we're on. And I applaud you out there for your courage as we journey together. We get this chance to also look at the psychotropics and another piece of information I find very interesting that I want to share with you today. So when we look at psychotropic drugs for ADHD. Many of you have heard the names. How many of you have heard the name Adderall? What about, let's see, another one, Concerta, Daytrana. Have you, how many of you have heard those names before? What about Focalin or Ritalin, Quilivant or Vyvanse? If you've heard any of these names, let's talk about these a little bit. How many of you also have heard of Demerol, hydrocodone, morphine, Percocet, oxycodone, or OxyContin? How many of you have heard any of those terms? When you look up Schedule 2 drugs, when you look up the list of what's called Schedule 2 drugs, so the FDA classifies drugs in different categories based on different factors of the effects of human beings based on their, let's say, intensity and their risk profile when it comes to dependence. And the FDA has classified every drug that I just mentioned, that we just talked about, in one classification called Schedule 2. Would you consider, if for the benefit of your child's education, behavioral, what have you, giving your child a low dose of morphine or Demerol or hydrocodone? Well, the FDA has those classified the same as Focalin, Ritalin, and the other ADHD drugs, classified the same. Now, lobbyists have tried to get the ADHD drugs off of Schedule 2. They have poured money, time, and energy into trying to make that change. But to this day, the FDA has refused to make that change. So when we look at accurate information, we get an opportunity to examine things for what they are, not from what we've been led to believe. And let that, if it's going to alarm you, if it is, let it be something that empowers you to dig deeper, to contemplate, to discern, not to make drastic changes, not to start to blame yourself, not to look at things in your situation and say, well, this is bad or this is good, or I'm going to ignore this, but just what does it mean? What might it mean for my child? How can I be able to, in whatever path I'm on, be able to continue to lean into getting more information that I can make the opportunity for my child, if there is going to be one, for them to have a life without the need for psychotropics, a reality. And I'm telling you, people, that just the path of just them functioning well typically does not lead to that. The path of discernment, the path of getting information, the path of understanding their abilities, and the path of knowing how to, in your daily life, actually empower the skills that they might be demonstrating when on the psychotropics, is what is going to actually help them build the skills and the development and the confidence to be able to one day likely not need the psychotropics anymore. And that type of empowerment, that type of buildup is exciting. And that is what we get an opportunity to do, so that your child, that child can be and display the true strength that is within them. And so we get that opportunity through this path of discernment, not to make drastic, not to look at good or bad, but what is accurate and what is the most impactful and effective for the life, health, goals, and legacy of your child. We get this opportunity today. And on this path, we get to talk about, let's talk about discipline. Kids 12 and under, and even in not just kids, we need discipline in our lives. We need it. We need structure and guidelines. We need discipline. Think about the road you drive on every day. Or is it just now some of you may drive on a road. I was going to say a country road, but I don't want to be, sound like I'm trying to be, prejudice against roads here. I mean, I'm sure there's roads out there that are not just country roads that have no markers, no lines, just bare, right? Okay. Some of us have driven at some point on a road that just has no guidelines whatsoever. Okay. But in society, we typically have driving rules. And depending on what country you're in and what side you're supposed to be on and how you're supposed to navigate, even in those roads. But typically, we have some type of guiding factors, some type of rules, markers, lines, white, yellow, barriers, different things that guide us on our path. This brings a structure and an organization to driving. We have speed limits and other types of laws that guide us in this process. And when we do not operate within the confines of these rules, there can be consequences. Now, we don't want consequences, and we strive to be as conscientious as possible out there on the roads. But nowadays, that's a struggle. And for us to be able to recognize that, hey, we may need to discipline ourselves when it comes to driving with our focus, with our attentiveness, with our habits, with our consideration of others. This is an area that we may need to take it upon ourselves to just be the best that we can be. But that sometimes, for some of us, can take a bit of work. And sometimes in life, we may have had an encounter with a ticket or a situation that has not been pleasant, hopefully not detrimental, but that has encouraged us through the discipline to be a little bit more mindful of our situation and our opportunities. Sometimes we need a little bit of challenge, a little bit of discipline, maybe even a little bit of punishment to be able to empower us to put more energy into focusing on things that are going to be healthier for us. I wish that wasn't the case for me as a human being, but sometimes it just is, right? Sometimes we have to have a healthy amount of pain to be able to direct us to the most powerful, transformative experiences in our lives. And if we as adults at times need a healthy, measured amount of pain to help, how much more might a child 12 and under? Now, you can, in your discernment and wisdom, be able to structure what that may look like. The key is in this journey to use your wisdom and discernment. We get an opportunity to move away from the messages of hurt that have misguided us into believing things across the board, like spankings, are unhealthy for children. This is not only about spankings, this is just one of the most profound examples. This is something that we get confronted with, where we are told that the research shows that spankings are unhealthy for children. Well, I want to tell you that children, largely, ones who have not been abused. Now, there are children who've been abused. There's adults who've been abused. There have been people who have, in the name of spanking, been exposed to something that has nothing to do with what a lawful, appropriate spanking. And those things are real. They need to stop. There's no place for them. Those things are awful and vicious. Yet we get to discern those actions from what healthy, loving, firm, effective discipline for a child 12 and under may look like. And I'm here to tell you that you have the ability to discern. That ability has been taken from you, or try to be robbed from you by blanket statements poured into us in our society that point us to psychotropic drugs. That is the bottom line, to push us in a way to have some kind of outcome instead of realizing that you have a discernment. You can discern what might be healthy, effective, measured amounts of pain that our children need, not trying to be their friends, not giving in to fear, not walking in the legacy of hurt, but using true discernment to understand what your child may need in the measure, to understand if you have multiple children that you're working with, their needs are not the same, that you can have one child in the home that needs a ton of discipline and another child who needs very little. And that is because they have different temperaments. Check out the last video, part 4, where we discuss inner temperaments and help us be able to discern amongst children, even children that we get the opportunity to encourage and build up and empower, that they have different needs. We can discern what their needs are, whatever those needs are, even their needs that make us uncomfortable, even their needs that we don't want to fulfill, especially in the line of discipline, because it pains our hearts. And it might bring temporary pain to their bodies, right? But it does not, in love and in wisdom and in truth and in discernment, there is no evidence that it brings a pain to their hearts or their spirits. Not in reality, not in truth. And this is what we get to embrace in this journey, so that we can use great discernment, great wisdom to unlock that, so that you can unlock the true potential of your child, a child, those children. We're on this journey together. Stay tuned, stay connected, stay involved. We get the opportunity after this series to talk more about practical wisdom and strategies and the pain and the challenge and the struggle and how to overcome it together. This is a journey that we get to be on. So thank you for being here today. You what is happening in your path of discernment? What do you have the opportunity to truly explore and discern for yourself? Where is your path of discernment leading you? Well, I hope it leads you back to stay connected, stay involved, stay tuned, like and subscribe. Let's stay here and let's continue this journey together. Thank you for being